it's worth saying that it did kind of, with appropriate apologies to those for whom it didn't sneak up, who've been watching the development of it with alarm. But I know, obviously, I'm a Northern Irish MP, and with respect to English votes, English laws, and the fact that policing is entirely devolved, we haven't engaged very deeply in it, except a few weeks ago when it was published, going, have you looked at this? It's wild, and it's everything you said it was, in terms of massively overreaching, and yes, criminalising protest, and allowing those very broad definitions that would cover almost every area of kind of freedom of expression and gathering and so on that people would seek to use. It's worth saying, while obviously it's overwhelming to see every day such a majority that the Conservatives have, and I suppose the normal lobbying of your MP and so on, there aren't close votes at the moment. It's worth saying that the way to oppose it is exactly how it's been done in the last 3 or 4 days now. Quite clearly, if the appalling policing in Clapham on Saturday night hadn't happened, there probably would be very little mobilisation against the second reading in terms of the debate today. But I suppose that was a very visual representation of how protests can be policed very, very poorly, and what's at stake. And I suppose, just in terms of the surge of emails that I would have received in my inbox over the last 72 hours, that has created a mobilisation that was needed on this bill, and it certainly will have alerted MPs who maybe were kind of following a whip, or who haven't particularly engaged in this area of policy. So it's that, and I suppose explaining the principle at stake, but in practical terms, because obviously the rebuttal from the government, they'll hide it in, oh well, this is just about more serious penalties for the worst offenders and so on, and they're kind of hiding the scope and the reach of this bill in some kind of popular criminal justice mechanisms. But I suppose exactly the type of mobilisation that the MPs who've been leading on it, and the civil society groups have managed in the last couple of days, explaining it to people in tangible terms about what it would mean for their lives. And genuinely, I mean, as I say, it doesn't affect Northern Ireland, other than I suppose principle and tone. It doesn't affect here practically, and I've had at least a couple of hundred of items of correspondence in the last few days. So I would imagine that can be replicated in GB. So that's how you do a mobilisation against it. But in terms of the scale of the majority and the votes, it's just the reasoned amendment has just fallen very substantially. I mean, there hasn't been anything approaching a substantial Conservative rebellion at this stage. So it is just going to be maybe picking off those Conservatives who we know are who we know are maybe susceptible to a fair argument on civil liberties.